I want to welcome you again to the Chicago Leadership Forum. My name is Mark Porter, and we're on our third talk presentation of a three-part series on Christian anthropology. Today, again, we welcome Father Peter Armenio. Father Peter is a priest at the prelature of Old State. He's a graduate and he has a doctorate in philosophy from the Pontifical University of Holy Cross. And he has published many books. One, Our Moral Life in Christ, The History of the Church, and The Mystery of Redemption and Christian Discipleship. Today's talk is on the theology and anthropology of life. And Father Peter is going to examine the following major topics. That sexual expression serves as the body language of a total gift of self between the spouses. For sexual union to have the fullest meaning, it must be at the service of self-giving love. Sexual union becomes a true act of love when it is within the structure of a couple giving themselves totally in marriage and open to life. The wrong view of human sexuality leads to the objectification of the spouses and a cheapening of human life. Please welcome Father Peter.
Given the sensitivity of the topic, let's say Hail Mary. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Well, this is always been one of the most controversial issues that the church has ever dealt with. I would say it almost rivals the first few centuries where the great majority started to deny that Jesus was God. Arian heresy, but that's about 1,600 years ago, 1,700 years ago, so we're not going to lose too much sleep over that heresy. But right now, the whole crisis of the family, moral relativism, euthanasia, abortion, assisted suicide are all spin-offs of a prophecy made by Paul VI when he wrote Humanae Vitae. And just to give you a little bit of a background, this requires academic analysis, anthropological analysis, because very good people gathered together to advise the Pope. This was remotely triggered by a conference, I think it was called the Lambeth Conference. It occurred in England where different Protestant denominations met and changed the general teaching on human sexuality and said that they've come of age to be able to contracept because there's more to marital relations than just to biologically produce babies. So the tone changed among our non-Catholic Christian brothers and sisters. And there was pressure on the church as there was medical advances. The church started to study what was called in those days the rhythm method. And the church is always very conservative. I don't mean politically conservative or doesn't want to make progress in doctrine, but careful in its pronouncements because the infallibility card is always, it's a negative charism. It's a great charism, but it's negative. You don't come up with, the Holy Spirit didn't give the church the power to come up with new truths, but to defend the truth already revealed in Scripture and in the tradition of the church. So studying the issue, Pius XII said, yes, this is listed to understand the cycle of the woman and understanding that cycle with good reason to plan your family. Because doing that does not affect the nature of the act. God exclusively to reproduce. That's an important part of marital union. The church teaches, the Second Vatican Council, that it's an essential aim of marriage, but not exclusive. It's intimately linked with what Mark was saying, summarizing my talk. So if I'm lulling you to sleep, what he says is basically the thesis of my talk. That it must reflect that culmination of friendship between a man and a woman in marriage. Paul VI gathered together a commission, probably in, my guess is 1966, to study the matter, because now there's a lot of pressure during, as we call it, the sexual revolution, and there was a lot of pressure on the church to change its position on artificial contraception. They moved beyond the consideration of the rhythm method, as they called it then. And so they did a study. And believe it or not, the commission was unanimous, but what I gather is the majority of the members of that commission encouraged the Holy Father to change the church's position on artificial contraception. So he politely sent the boys and girls back to their respective countries and proceeded to write Humanae Vitae that contradicted the findings and the deliberations and the conclusions of his commission. And that was basically his death sentence. After that, there was tremendous bias against church teaching in general, and a general dissent against Humanae Vitae. Literally everybody knows. But it was, Jesus is not into good timing. When he launched the first apostles and disciples into the pagan, hedonistic, violent world of ancient Rome, it was bad timing. When that encyclical was written, it seemed like kind of bad timing, given the cultural changes. But the gospel doesn't conform itself to the world. It takes it seriously, it interfaces with the world, but it doesn't conform itself to the world. And I want to just use that medieval adage that I always like to use, coined originally by St. Augustine, that faith seeks understanding. That, okay, this is the church's position. I am going to embrace it humbly because this truth goes beyond the capacity of my intellect. We're talking about now a supernatural charism that the church has in interpreting faith and morals. Not detail, like economic policy or matters of sociology or politics, but general principles. The church has that charism to make pronouncements. And the attitude of a philosopher or a theologian is, let's accept this. Now let's figure it out intellectually. So Augustine says, believe, then try to understand it. Because as you try to understand it, you start to realize that this is objectively true. Aquinas will say that if you veer away from the teachings of the church, there's always a flaw in your logic that you can discover. Even if it's a mystery of faith, you never be able to prove a mystery of faith, but you can prove the faulty logic that occurred to deviate from that truth of faith. And even more so, if you will, of matters of the natural law. I mean, this is not a mystery of faith. This is morality that can be discovered and understood by the light of human reason. Easy? I would say no, given the popular opinion right now, and so little is said about this topic, understandably, but that should not be an excuse to hide from the truth, because the truth never harms, always heals, even though it may be painful to embrace the truth. So faith seeks understanding. Let's figure this out. I would say one person made big headway way before years, which surprised me, because I started to study on my own. This book is a brick. If you're short, if you have insomnia, you may want to use that book. It's a great book, but it's heavy going, and it's called Love and Responsibility, written by Carol Wojtyła. And that was written probably, which surprised me, I thought it was written maybe in the 70s, after Humanae Vitae, but it was written in 1960, way before the Second Vatican Council. And he anthropologically makes a case for openness to life, and the reason why the church, not just the church, the Judeo-Christian tradition, has spoken the way it has spoken about matters of chastity. Because, as Aquinas says, authority is an argument if you're a believer, but it's the weakest argument. Aquinas says the more you can engage your reason, the better. And there is no incompatibility between faith and reason. And I think the issue here with Humanae Vitae is that thinkers are not trying to mesh faith and reason. There's compelling reasons. Now, it's my opinion anyway, it's important to understand the why for Humanae Vitae. It's important to come up with intellectual reasoning for why the church takes that position. I think it's important to see that this is objectively true for everybody, whether you're a Christian or not. With that being said, it helps tremendously to believe that the church is guided by the Holy Spirit. So, let's see here. I'm not going to go, people have to go to work, but I want to start always with, especially these talks, the first few chapters of the Bible, the oldest part, which concerns man and woman. So the first revelation, even before the fall, even before the prediction of redemption, the first piece of revelation is about man and woman. And God, from the get-go, after creating man and a woman, institutes a special relationship between a man and a woman. And he says, your relationship is to become one flesh. Other talks have went into the meaning of one flesh, but right now, what God is saying is you must leave mother and father. Now, because what's being emphasized here, it's not, okay, no mother-in-law in your household, that's not allowed. That's not the point. Even though maybe for father-in-law, maybe someone would want to interpret it that way, but it doesn't mean that. And please don't quote scripture that way if you're frustrated. But what it means is that this relationship with the spouse, a man and a woman should have, is an exclusive sort of love. It's exclusive love. It transcends any kind of human love, because the love you have for your mom and your dad is the highest love if you're not married. Should be anyway, highest human love. And God is saying that love has to transcend it. And that love is manifested by physical union. That physical union is a reflection of leaving mother and father. That physical union is a total gift of self to each other, and God says no one can break this bond. This bond is permanent because real love is permanent. Real love is sacrificial. The highest love you have by its very nature has to be exclusive. In other words, that doesn't mean we don't love other people, but spousal love comes first. That love transcends every kind of love. At the same time, God reveals the purpose of becoming one flesh. reproduce and multiply, and fill the earth. So that's the first revelation, and that doesn't change. And this filling of the earth, this reproduction, is intimately linked with this leaving of mother and father and become one flesh. Right? What isn't said is that anybody can indiscriminately become one flesh. God doesn't say that any man and woman should become one flesh and reproduce and multiply. God says, oh no, only when there is this complete self-gift of the woman and the man are you called to reproduce and multiply. And see, when we talk about openness to life, you just can't go into, at least I don't think so, and I'm basically trying to clumsily plagiarize Theology of the Body of St. John Paul, because he's the one who's made revolutionary breakthroughs in an anthropology of human sexuality, which I think is indispensable in this day and age, because the Christian culture, in significant part, is gone. So just to say this is the pronouncement of Scripture, this is the pronouncement of the Church, doesn't cut it, because we do want to evangelize with compelling intellectual reasons why this is of objective natural law, even though it's a topic that is not very popular to discuss. But to understand it, we have to understand a little bit of the nature of human sexuality, or of sexual expression. We see in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that God expresses or describes his love for Israel in explicit sexual terminology. But, isn't he spirit? He's not male or female? But the Song of Songs, he really gets into detail. It's not dirty, but he gets into detail. Embraces and passionate kisses and waiting outside of a bedroom outside with serenading his beloved, and running off alone and romantic infatuations in this Song of Songs. Then even gets more graphic in all of the prophecies, but especially Hosea. Hosea has issues with Israel because Israel has become a prostitute and has been unfaithful to him. This infidelity, I don't think it was literally just sexual infidelity, it was worshiping other idols, mixing it up with the Gentiles, etc. And God makes, from his vantage point, a total gift of self to Israel as a groom or a husband makes a gift to his wife. So we see in scriptural imagery that Israel is the exclusive love of God. And he expresses that love in clear sexual terminology. And we're going to reflect on why he uses sexual terminology. It's not father to son or father to daughter. It is husband to wife. And his issue with Israel is that she is cheating on him. And he wants her back. So, we continue looking at this sexual terminology, and I think the key to this, not I think I'm positive, is the New Testament. Because now it's explicitly said that the church is bride of Christ. We're all collective bride. Why is that? And the marriage ceremony of Christ and his church culminates on the cross. That's where he finishes his life here on earth and lays down his life for every person in the most sacrificial way possible for a human being. Well, he was not a divine being, but we understand for a man or a human person. And that's known as And then he uses the virtual last words before he dies. I don't want to say it in Latin, not to show off, but just to reinforce a point I want to make. It consummatus est. It is finished, but literally it is consummated. This is a marital term that the sacrament of matrimony, that's why ideally, I know plan A is make marital union part of the sacramental ceremony. Very challenging in this day and age, but that's the ideal anyway. And once that marriage is consummated through sexual union, that sacrament is done, at least for Christians. So Jesus is using a marital term. So, okay, keeping in mind the imagery of the Old Testament and Christ's love for his church graphically manifested on the cross, and now the one-word definition of God, which is agape. You've heard this before, but there's a lot of different words for love in Greek. One gentleman here from a very academic institution told me there's 4. After giving a homily at one of the parishes. But the one I want to focus on, you got the eros, which is love. It's, the pastries back there were really good. So there's eros there. The coffee's good. More eros. We root for the same baseball team. Some of us anyway. That's feeling. I share something in common with friends because we work in the same place, or we were in the same parish, or we have the same political opinions. Whatever it is, it's common ground. And then the agape, where I love to give myself. My love is unconditional, and I just give myself. Matter of fact, I was just reading it and doing my own meditation that is the ultimate love is to lay down your life. So what God is revealing is not that God, okay, I'm going to be a little risque in divine revelation. What he's saying is sexual love must reflect that total gift of self. The culmination of the revelation of God's love is the icon of Christianity. The beat-up, naked dead man who lays down his life. And that's why sexual term, because as Augustine says, and the other fathers of the church say, that to understand the Old Testament, you need the light of the New. And the New Testament, Christ illuminates the Old Testament. Because everything basically is a prophecy of Christ. And so that's why those sexual terms are used, because sexual expression must always reflect a certain kind of love. It's the body language of this total laying down one's life. I want to use an example or an image of St. Josemaria that I saw in a movie when they were talking about openness to life. And St. Josemaria said that the marriage bed is an altar. Our face, he said, it sounds good, okay, but I want to figure that one out. Marriage bed is an altar. And in a certain sense, that is the Mass. Because what is the Mass? Let's just look at the Mass very briefly. It's the representation of Christ's self-gift on the cross. That's what it is. You can't understand it. It's that same sacrifice, invisibly, sacramentally brought to the present moment. Sexual union, therefore, is a reaffirmation, a reenactment of what happened at the altar. I give my whole life to you. And so it's a very special expression of that self-gift that the spouses made with each other in front of God, in front of their families at marriage. So that's what it's supposed to mean. All right. let's look a little bit more specifically at John Paul's Theology of the Body. We've been looking at it, believe it or not, but now I want to look at it a little bit more anthropologically. He takes this from Immanuel Kant. John Paul was basically a personalist and a neo-Thomist. And he took this from Kant, this squares beautifully with the gospel, that a person is not a something, but a somewhat. A something you always use for your own welfare, for your own benefit. Food is a something. Clothing is a something. But a person can never be a something. No person is a person is a someone. What are the implications? That a person is an end in herself or himself. That a person is always an object of love. Doesn't mean you can't go through your connections or have a client who you want to work with for your own betterment, or you use the service of somebody, but you can never use somebody as if that person were a thing. I am friendly with a person exclusively to garner favor. That's the only reason. Or I remember as a youngster growing up, we favored a certain friend because he had a ping pong table. So he was popular, not because he was a fun kid, but the compelling reason was the ping pong table. And then there was another guy who was even more popular because he had a pool table. So is it okay to hang out because he has a pool table? If that's the only reason you're using him, or I want to get a free meal, so I'm going to just hop in unexpectedly, but I have no interest in that person. You can never use another person. That's a natural law, and that's what human dignity demands. Because the human person is a someone, which means, ultimately, that person is an image of God. That person transcends material creation. Silly little example. I always like to use the example, seeing little footage of India and these big elephants and these little Indian girls, leading these big elephants where these little girls want them to go, or a horse or whatever. It kind of illustrates that they transcend material creation. So a person has to be an object of love and treated with love. And an object of reception of good, never used. Okay. This brings us to human sexuality and open to life. The sexual activity, and it's easy, that's a sin against purity, looked at in anthropological terms, is wrong because unless the conditions, or the right conditions, compatible and demanded by human dignity, if they're not there, that person is used. And what I can share with you, in my pastoral work, chastity is a challenging virtue. It's always been challenging. Maybe now it's even more challenging. I've never met a fulfilled person who has not gotten this virtue right. Because basically, without sophisticated anthropological studies, that person has experienced being an object. And it always, in the marriage structure, it doesn't mean, automatically you're married, no one's going to be an object anymore. I'm not saying that. John Paul, in fact, put everybody on edge by saying that even there, you've got to do things properly. So, sexual activity needs to be the highest form of charity. Which doesn't mean that, we're going to engage in the highest form of charity. A structure has to be there. An implicit structure has to be there for it to be the highest form of charity. We have to always go back to Genesis, that this expression of love reflects that leaving of mother and father, which means this has to be an exclusive, lifelong, sacrificial friendship. All right. Now, so sexual activity should never be used outside of that ultimate charity, and let's look at openness to life a little bit more. Outside of marriage, the purpose of sexual union is illicit, wrong, sinful, because you shouldn't be open to life. Now, this does not mean you terminate an unborn person or you do all sorts of perversions. What I mean is that life is reproducing, is having offspring, but raising those offspring with the mother and father. And outside of marriage, that sexual expression is wrong because, first of all, you can't be... Listen, God creates human life any way he wishes, even through illicit union. God is the creator. Okay? And someone who's born as a consequence of illicit union should keep their head high because they've been created and willed by God. They're daughters of God, sons of God. With that being said, it is a natural law that human life spring between the intimacy of a mother and father who can raise the child and image to the child imperfectly the love of God that is best reflected by the love of a dad and the love of a mom. Because God describes love in both manners, in the Old Testament and also in the New. So that's why John Paul would say in his Theology of the Body, outside of the marriage bed, sexual activity, even activity that doesn't involve sexual union, is wrong because there's no gift of self. What marriage means anthropologically is I give my whole life to you, as much with all I have. Okay, now you express it sexually. Now it's meaningful. But until I do that, the structure is not there. I am lying through those sexual acts. Because God has created this power to reflect that total gift of self, and it's just not there. That commitment and that dedication is not there. As much as, and people they brainwash each other now in relationships. Well, we are already committed. No, you're not. You don't love each other with everything you got. If you're so committed, I always say, people growl at me, if you're that committed, get married. Right now. Or, make it happen. Call your pastor up and go over in graduate school and another job and, higher salary or, we need more maturity. I don't know, whatever it is. Well, then you don't have, you are using the other person. Well, he's okay with it or she's okay with it. Doesn't matter. Whether you, please slap me. I'm okay with that, so really slap me. Well, hopefully you won't take me up on it. Maybe after the talk you will. I remember, I'll never forget it, I was really scared out of my gourd. I studied in Rome and did, obviously, as a seminarian preparing to be ordained, I did no pastoral work. Anyway, learning all sorts of moral theology and philosophy and all that kind of stuff. But then when I got into the trenches, I started having panic attacks. And when I was in the confessional for the first time, I was just praying to Our Lady, please, I don't want to, let me just, give me a pass today. I don't want anybody to come. I don't know what to say. I'm really scared. And I remember someone said, I'm really scared. I haven't been for a long time. Do you think you're scared? I think I'm more scared than you are. I'm good with this. So anyway, I come to the United States, and I'm giving a recollection, and gentleman says, I was 26 years old. I'd like to bring my wife with me to get some counseling. And I just begged him. I said, I I'm not your man. I mean, go to your pastor. I don't know what I'm doing. He said, I'll be the judge of that, he said. I said, well, I'm the judge and I don't know what I'm doing. He said, well, I'm going to come anyway, if you don't mind. I said, well, I'm not going to say no to you. So they come and the wife is just staring into the couch. You know, I'm getting more panicked. You know, this is not working. And so he starts describing his wife, saying, you know, I buy her things. You know, she has some of her favorite restaurants that take her out. I want her an extra cycle, you know, so she can work out, so doesn't have to go outside in the cold. You know, I invite her to say the rosary with me. No response, and she's not saying, hey, she needs that rosary. Now, I remember my moral theology professor, and well, you know, if this marital problems is not the only cause, but you may want to investigate a little bit if they're using artificial contraception, because that puts a strain on the relationship, because it creates the wrong kind of attitude towards each other. Their sexual lives are not based on openness to life and charity. So I said, well, I might as well give this my best shot. And I was just kind of praying that she'd say something so I wouldn't have to weigh in. So I don't even think I got the words out. You know, it took me probably, you know, the guy, the poor guy said, just say it. And I said, I'm trying to, but it's kind of hard to say. You using contraception. And she just went through the roof. My gosh, she exploded and started to sob and sob and sob. I'm not saying this is every day, but this was my first one. So my first, you know, it's marriage cancer. I had a point I might not want to do this. It was traumatic. So she was crying and said she feels like an object and feels used. And so I turned on him. I said, hey, you're the problem. You think you said she's the problem, you're the problem. No, but I want to invite, no, you gotta get this thing right. Before you start saying all sorts of rosaries, you gotta get this thing right. You gotta treat your wife as a person. What she's saying to you, she's your pet or an object of use. So that was kind of enlightening, that experience. I hope I don't have it again. You know, I'm willing to do it, but I don't want any sobbing, wailing, and hollering over these things. So, back to the theology of the body. I'm almost done. The sexual act, the marital act, has to mirror that gift of self. Okay, you got the marriage structure there. That's why this is not, we have to go through certain steps. We're already married. And the case people make is, well, you know, we don't eat like animals. I mean, if you had an exquisite piece of filet mignon in the corner, and I said, listen, this is really good food. It's on the floor there, why don't you eat it? Any utensils? No, just eat it. Eat it like a dog. You would be very resentful. Because when we get nourished, it transcends the way animals get nourished. Okay, well, what they say is, well, sexual relations is a lot more than just proliferating. And we agree with that. And so but the conclusion they draw is we could tinker with the structure of that marital act that, under normal circumstances, gives rise to life every time. No, but it gives rise to life. It's not exactly a brilliant conclusion, but, you know, that's what happens. And so and they talk about, because if you start getting very biological about your sexuality, you're falling into physicalism. We are human beings, so we have the right to go beyond biology. According to Aquinas and Aristotle and John Paul, the person is a unity. There's no biological part and spiritual part and psychological. We're all one person. The body is totally inspired by the soul. The body is an instrument of the soul. There's no separation there. And what the theology of the body says is that the sexual act within marriage, we're all set up the marriage part, must mean total gift of self. Now, I have to get a little bit explicit here. So even if you're way beyond childbearing age, the husband must give himself to his wife and leave himself in his wife, that we call an extension of himself that we call the reproductive seed. That has to be there because that act is very special. That act is sacramental. There's 7 sacraments, but I would say the sexual act in marriage is an 8th sacrament because it reiterates the marriage vows, and only then does God, beyond these 7 sacraments, he intervenes in this act, and only in this act, not in any other sexual activity, only in that act, and he instills and infuses the soul. And the theology body says that if there's that physical, that's what artificial contraception, if there's that physical holding back of the purpose of the sexual act, then the other person becomes an object of use. Well, I don't want it to be that way. Doesn't matter. You don't want it to be that way. I'm going to slap you, but I don't want to hurt you. Well, whether you want to hurt me or not, a slap is a slap. And does that mean that the purpose of marital intimacy is proliferation? No. Notice that not every act conceives. I'm not a doctor, but many don't. Because God is saying, respect the purpose, but do it the way I have ordained it. I want it to be that sacramental mirror of total gift of self. I want the man to give himself and leave himself. And sometimes that leaving of self personifies love. Because I want these sexual relations to mirror the Blessed Trinity of God's Spirit. God the Father, God the Son, love each other totally, give themselves totally to each other. That love is so perfect, it's a bond called the Holy Spirit, which is another person. So that openness to life is part of that total self-gift. Lastly, and very lastly, the issues we have, as I began to talk, are spin-offs for not getting this thing right. Basically, we have decided, us personally, that we could tinker with God's plan for man and woman and express ourselves sexually freely without the accompaniment of moral truth. And so what has occurred, yes, we should try to do the best we can to preserve unborn human life. But this is a symptom of not seeing the sacredness of marital intimacy and how sexuality is expressed totally under very narrow margins. It's expressed between a man and a woman who give themselves to each other and they're open to life, no matter what age they are. And so, in a certain sense, moral relativism makes sense if you don't get this right. If there's no objectivity to marital intimacy open to life, then you can make a case for other sexual perversions. And then what results from that, the lack of sacredness or the view of a misunderstanding of the sacredness and dignity of human sexuality, then you have destruction of human life on all levels. It's not just on the unborn level. So these are just a few points of openness to life. I appreciate that no one threw tomatoes at me. I will open the floor for questions. That's it. Yes, sir.
So, what's it called? The sixth, soon to be saint.
Yes.
He said things in Humanae Vitae that can't come true. What are some of those things?
Well, I think the attacks on human life, he said, if you don't get this right, the future holds dire consequences. And so he kind of prophesied all these issues that we are experiencing now. I mean, it's a short document. And, when I read it for the first time, I was kind of surprised because I expected, one anathema after another. Listen, get it right or you're out of here. It's very pastoral. Very, Now, when I tell people, because, I haven't heard this ever, and then I spring this openness to life, what I do is, especially in spiritual direction or even confession, get a hold of that document, just read it, let's talk about it. And a lot of times it's like, it's pretty reasonable, very pastoral. Yes?
Is there any record of who, if anybody, he consulted with in preparing that document? I've heard the story about the committee and the commission and so forth, and it sounded like everybody thought it was going one way, and then it came out very differently. Is there any history about who he talked to?
Well, what I've heard, I wouldn't swear by it, but I've heard that Paul VI did get a hold of love and responsibility, and that Cardinal Wojtyła at that time advised that he consulted with him, because Karol Wojtyła then was very avant-garde. In fact, that's why he became Archbishop of Krakow, because there was a kind of a concordat between the communist political regime. You couldn't designate a bishop without their okay. And the primate, Wyszynski, getting over the department for, came up with 4 or 5, maybe up to 6 different possibilities for Archbishop of Krakow that they were all rejected by the communist regime. And so Wyszynski got together with the prime minister and said, listen, what is this? He said, well, no, we want to have an archbishop. We're just not happy with the ones you picked. But if you picked Wojtyła, I think that would pass. Because they want to create division in the church. It was very avant-garde with this. No one talked this way in the olden days. He did. And so he's kind of seen as a liberal. And liberal within the parameters of church teaching. Aquinas was a liberal back in his day. Augustine was a liberal. I'm not saying, hey, we all have to be liberals in our theology. Anyway, they approved of it. They approved it. Paul VI named him Archbishop. And the communists, about 6 months later, we swindled. This guy's the absolute worst person because he's facing us intellectually. He's addressing communism with deep anthropology. And so he was a known quantity. He gave a retreat to Paul VI in 1976. So I think probably that's what happened. That he discussed this with the Pope. He was already cardinal then, so he had that influence on the Pope. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, this argument's really, we've heard in Rome there's been many conferences of revisiting or re-examining Humanae Vitae. Many are using the argument claiming that we have to read Humanae Vitae now in the light and in accordance with a paradigm shift that was contained in the Mors Laetitia. That it's the personal conscience of the husband and wife under their own circumstances, unrelated to objective truth, etc., that they can make the decision to either contracept or whatever. And I was just wondering whether you could address that particular argument that's not new.
No.
It's been around.
It's been around, and that was going on after Humanae Vitae, those kind of arguments, sometimes at very high levels. My response is that whether there's a paradigm shift or not, you always you look at the culture, you look at the needs of the people. There's your discernment. But the truth of church teaching always holds. You have to always discern in light of the pronouncements of the church, not because they were real smart, but we believe, part of our faith is, I've decided to believe that the church is guided by the Holy Spirit. So, I also believe that no matter how wild it gets, I'm a very amateur teacher of history of the church, you've had a lot of wildness among the hierarchy, but the church has never officially, as church, taught something that contradicts its own tradition. When people talk about conscience, respect conscience, I will respect conscience. That's the last voice of God. But conscience is not the creator of the natural law. Conscience applies it. So that's how I interpret. Yeah, we have to discern. How I discern this, I don't just throw the book at people because I'd say many people are not unaware of the church's position, and if they are, they think it's insanity, not being able to contracept. So, I don't know, I counsel and I advise that any priest to do that, take people where they're at, which doesn't mean don't disclose this. I'll disclose it. Let me work with you. Okay, you've never heard this before. Are you willing to pray for the light? Yes. Okay, good. All right, we're off to this start here. And most people are. They're willing. All right, this is a document. Just read a few minutes a day. I'd like you to do that, and the next time you come, let's discuss it. To me, that's what it means. That's what discernment means. Discernment to me doesn't mean, okay, we're going to change the whole thing. No, we're not at liberty to do that. This is the goal. This is what the church teaches. We're going to work towards that and try to see that so that your conscience is formed and is refined and is governed by objective truth. Because if I start saying that conscience can change the moral law, that's dangerous because I'm at liberty to become a racist. I'm at liberty to impose religious persecution of people who are not Christian. I mean, it cuts both ways. Because and I can't criticize regimes that contradict the natural law, or maybe suicide bombing. Well, that's their religion. They are. They're literally obeying conscience because they're going to be martyrs, and it's God's will that they just devastate the infidel and destroy them. And you're going to be a martyr if you commit suicide, and heaven's going to be a blast. That's conscience. But what's going on? I'm creating my own morality, and I'm applying the morality that I've created. So we can't do that. And that's illogical. Because if you start doing that, and you're the arbiter of morality, society is going to just crumble. And it always takes a toll when you do that ultimately. Any other questions? Sorry for it. Yes. Yes, doctor.
Just getting into the last question, talking about the Mars Laetitia, and it might be, I'm going to ask you to give coming attractions for your next talk. If you look at the sort of other assault on the theology of the body, or the result of the assault on the theology of the body, is the breakdown of marriage and divorce and things like
right.
that. And then you get into some of the footnote vagueness in that apostolic exhortation.
Right.
And some of the schismatic things that are going on with the various branches of the church as to how they handle union and divorce to be married Catholics. How do you see that playing out, or what advice do you have for us as to how to deal with those issues?
Well, I would say the same thing. We want to be prudent, obviously, because this comes from the highest level. And he says himself that we want to interpret from the tradition of the church. And the tradition of the church says that you have to be in a state of grace to receive the Eucharist. And where it gets fuzzy is invincible ignorance, where someone has done something wrong and is completely innocent. Because certain conditions, for something to be grievous, and this is since day one, has to be objectively grievous. You have to know it's grievous, and you have to will it that way. If you don't know it's seriously wrong, you're acting in good faith, you're obligated to find out the truth. You don't just wallow in ignorance. But if it's invincible ignorance, and it's not your fault at all, that's where it gets grit. But objectively speaking, someone in a regular marriage shouldn't receive communion. It doesn't have anything to do with unworthiness. We're all unworthy to receive Christ. We've got to be in conditions. It's sort of like I got a terrible flu. My stomach is really shot. I'm exhausted. I'm not in condition to play tennis with you. It's not a question of unworthy. I got to get my health back in order to receive. Because communion also signifies total union with the teachings of the church and total union with a willingness to be completely united to Christ. And grievous sin creates wedge. This comes from the tradition of the church. So it can't change. I think I read Morris Letizia a couple of times. Obviously, I think the whole document, chapter 8 is what everybody's focused on. That has to be interpreted from light of familiaris consortium, John Paul II. Because you don't want to fall into magisterial relativism. Well, but this document says this document says that. No, there's a unity. And there's ordinary infallibility that when the tradition of the church starts building on itself, that's ordinary infallibility. So, any other questions? You got to go to work. Yes.
You might want to talk about our father, Saint Jose Maria, what he said about his parents' love for one another.
Yes.
And then he blessed it with both his hands. Because we're looking at to be negative. This is all positive. Love is divine.
Yeah, this is all positive.
Something great. Yeah. But you know what he said? He said, I bless it with both my hands because I don't have 4 hands to bless it more.
Yes.
Marriage love is tremendous.
Right.
That's what we're trying to get at.
Absolutely. And that children are a blessing. We have to count on God's loving providence in this issue. Okay, let's finish with another Hail Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, anyway, thank you for listening.